My name is Jack, and I came to ShareWell in early 2021 to find peer support for my diagnosis of social anxiety and generalized anxiety. I knew the value of peer support from my experience in recovery from alcohol abuse. Peer support really was a determining factor in my ability to refrain from alcohol. And from ShareWell, I've gotten a lot of tips, techniques, and learnings that help me manage my anxiety. So I'm delighted that I found ShareWell. For much of my career, I was a so-called professional facilitator. I've hired, trained, evaluated, and mentored dozens of facilitators over my career. For the last 10 years that I worked as a executive coach, half that time as an employee and half that time running my own management consulting business. I see facilitation as a dynamic blend of science and art. I mean, the facilitator is responsible for creating the safe space and the conditions so that each member of the group has an opportunity to be open, to be candid, and to be vulnerable as far as they wish, knowing that they will be supported, accepted, and respected by the group. I felt honored when ShareWell asked me to share some of my tips, learnings, and experiences. Successful peer support hosts have a set of core beliefs and values, as well as personality traits. Don't worry, since you decided to start this training, there's a pretty high chance that you already have those traits. The rest of this training will help reinforce your facilitation skills too. Great peer support hosts believe that mental health conditions are medical illnesses, much like other physical illnesses, including diabetes, asthma, high blood pressure, etc. They don't define us as persons. And we also believe that people can get better. Recovery is always possible. Of course, recovery is individual and looks different for everyone. And recovery is not linear. We all have better days and worse days, but we're always making progress, even though it may not seem so. Not always feel that way. Of course, recovery is not linear. We all have better days and worse days, but we're always making progress, even though it may not always feel that way. Every person's experiences are valid. While they may be different, everyone's own experiences make them expert on their own recovery journey. And finally, we're all in this together. Always support, never criticize. People experiencing mental health issues can be very vulnerable. When we criticize them or make negative comments, we take advantage of that vulnerability. This gets us further away from our goal of helping support them on their way to recovery. As part of our efforts, it's crucial that we respect and protect their self-esteem. So be sure to frame any recommendations in terms of what benefits they may bring rather than what we think the person is doing so-called wrong. You know, even asking a question can be interpreted critically. For example, asking, "Why did you do that?" immediately puts the participant on the defensive, trying to justify their actions. It might be better to say, "Did you consider other approaches?" rather than asking them why they did something. Don't try to fix. It can be tempting to try to fix someone's symptoms because you think you can help. It's imperative that we accept all the person's symptoms and remind ourselves that fixing symptoms doesn't solve root causes. For example, someone living with depression may lack motivation, but this is a symptom of their condition and not something we can counteract or make go away, even when they're feeling unmotivated. For example, someone living with depression may lack motivation, but this is a symptom of their condition and not something we can counteract or make go away. Even when they're not feeling unmotivated, they may still experience other symptoms of depression. What we can do is speak of our own effective treatment plan and in turn encourage the group. Offering support and empathy can relieve the person's guilt and make treatment more possible. Sometimes eliminating a trigger is the kindest thing you can do. I recall that in one of my anxiety sessions, a person was being triggered by trying to put the car seat in the back of their car. They weren't confident that they had done it properly. I suggested that they simply go to the nearest fire station and the people there would put the car seat in the car properly and instruct the driver in how to do it in the future. It didn't really cure the anxiety, but at least the person was able to drive around with their grandchild. If group members start engaging in arguments or debates that seem aimed at changing another member's mind, step in and remind everyone that peer support brings us together over shared experiences, but those experiences remain personal to each person. Reframe and redirect the conversation to focus on supporting each member where they are at the moment with empathy and respect. Sometimes it's best just to say, "Thank you for sharing that." Here are also some examples of language that you might want to use to disagree with Grace. "Well, I'm not able to advise you on that. I can only speak from my own experience." "I'm sorry, but I don't have any experience or expertise in that area." Different approaches work for different people. Thank you for sharing. That sounds like a difficult situation. Thank you for sharing that. I find it helpful to remember that everyone believes their own behavior is logical, given their background and experience and knowledge. I would never ask someone to substitute my judgment for their own. Well, maybe when I was young and foolish, but life has a way of humbling us all, and so I try to approach each participant with humility. Because besides my role as a facilitator, I'm also there to learn, not to teach. Use I statements, not you statements. Most ShareWell hosts have a passion for helping others. We enjoy sharing our stories to help eliminate negative stereotypes about mental health conditions. But sometimes the language we use can create a barrier between us and the people we hope to reach. This is why using I statements is so important at ShareWell. I statements begin with "I think," "I feel," or "I experienced," rather than "people feel" or "people experience" or "everyone should." It's impossible for any one person to speak for a group. Starting a thought with "I" clarifies that you're speaking from your own personal point of view. I statements are non-judgmental. They don't accuse any people or groups of certain intentions or behaviors, and they're not meant to change the person with whom you're talking. I statements are a great way to convey how you feel. I statements are a very effective way for people to take responsibility for their own feelings. They're especially effective when expressing needs or emotions. Please do your best to avoid you statements. You statements direct a person to do something or feel a certain way. Avoid using prescriptive phrases that sound like advice, such as "you must," or "you shouldn't," or "people need to," or "society must stop," etc. This includes statements that go, "I think you should." Just because it started with an "I" doesn't mean that it didn't include a "you" statement as well. If I hear someone telling another participant what to do, I will usually step in and say, "I know you don't intend to give advice. Maybe you can rephrase that as an I statement. If they then say something like, well, I think you should blank, I'll usually help them reframe it in a correct I statement. Manage the time. Whoever is facilitating the group needs to be aware of the time and keep the group on task during sharing. Occasionally, there may be someone who dominates the group's time or is stuck in their own story, having told it perhaps many times in the past. It's important to keep your group moving forward while at the same time setting limits on monopolizing behaviors in a kind and compassionate manner. While it may be uncomfortable to interrupt someone, use your best judgment to find a good time to steer the conversation when appropriate and give everyone in the group a chance to speak and respond. So often, while actively listening to the speaker, I'll be looking at the body language of the other members of the group. If they're all very attentive, even if the share is going on long, I won't interrupt. But once I notice that the speaker is losing the group, that's when I will tend to intervene. Invite quieter voices forward. Sometimes there's more reserved participants in your group. If you're looking to engage your quieter participants, you can direct the conversation toward them by inviting them to contribute, such as, for those that haven't shared much yet, what is it like for you to be in this session today? In smaller, more intimate conversations, you can invite someone to share their thoughts directly by simply asking, while also giving them permission to not share. Olivia, you're welcome to share if you'd like. It's also okay if you want to observe today. As facilitator, you open the door for communication, but also respect if a person is not ready just yet. In one session, I called on a participant who hadn't spoken yet, and I asked her to say something just so I could hear her voice. And she said, like what? And I said, well, tell me what you had for breakfast today. Tell me what you thought about what Jean just shared. Tell me how you're feeling right now. Well, she opened up and talked about how she was feeling right now and made a valuable contribution to the conversation. Create a feedback loop. No one's born a great facilitator. The best way to improve your facilitation skills is through practice. At the end of your session, ask yourself the following questions. Number one, what was your biggest challenge during the session? Number two, what did you do? Number three, how did it turn out? Number four, what were your alternatives? And finally, number five, how do you plan to handle a similar situation in the future? A feedback loop is critical for improving your facilitation skills. If you have time at the end of this session to ask the group for feedback, great. If there's someone in the session that you know and respect and you can get individual feedback from them, fantastic. But please also remember you have the ShareWell host chat available to you. You can post a description of your situation and tap into the collective wisdom of the ShareWell host community. There's no one single way to be a great facilitator. One thing is for sure, you can't go wrong by demonstrating empathy and compassion with your authentic voice. Other than that, try mixing and matching our 10 tips and discover what suits you best. Remember, facilitation is a skill, and it's one you will continue to hone and improve. As you work on adding more tools to your facilitation toolkit, don't forget to show yourself some self-compassion. There might be moments when you don't have interactions go the way you envisioned, and that's okay. You're learning too. Assume positive intentions, respect every person as the ultimate expert of their own experience, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know, when you don't. Come back to look at our 10 tips for ideas as often as you need to. And finally, As you embark on your facilitation journey, we hope you have fun developing your own style, finding your own voice, and discovering how great a facilitator you can be.